Notion just fixed its biggest problem, database row permissions. With this new feature, you are now able to share a view of a database without sharing that entire database. This unlocks so many possibilities with Notion, like being able to create 100% secure client portals using the same master databases you use to manage all of your client work. As someone who's helped over 100 businesses implement Notion, this has to be the #1 feature that was holding Notion back for teams. And now that we finally have it, I truly believe that Notion has become one of the best softwares for running your business. So in this video, I'm going to show you how database row permissions work, how to build a fully functioning client portal, how to collaborate with external contractors inside Notion, and some of the current limitations with database row permissions. So let's dive in. Okay, so let's go over how database row permissions work. So as an example, I have this task database, and this could contain tasks that I want to share with people, but also some tasks that I may want to keep private. So for example, these top 3 tasks I may want to collaborate on with an external contractor, but inside the same database, I may also have this super secret task that has some sensitive business information that I don't want that contractor seeing. Now, before database row permissions, there was no way in Notion to share a portion of a database with a guest without that guest being able to access the entire database. Now, with database permissions, that is possible, and here's how. So first of all, at the database level itself, I can come to the share option here, and you'll notice we have this new feature here, which has page level access, and it has the option to add a new rule. So the way this works is when I add a new rule, I get the option to select any of my person properties within my database. And of course, you can have as many person properties as you like. So I might choose my assignee property, or I could also choose the created by property. For this particular use case, I want to assign tasks to my contractor and for them to be able to see those tasks. So I'm going to use the assignee property. And then it's also asked us what level of access we would like. I want the contractor to be able to actually mark tasks as done, add comments, change the due date if needed. So I'm going to give them can edit access, and then I can go ahead and create that rule. Now I have created that rule. You'll notice that the assignee property has been given this lock icon or this key icon. And in the info tag, we can see that it says anyone selected in an assignee can edit this page. So that's the initial setup. But what is slightly confusing is I don't now go ahead and actually add Rachel to this task database by coming in here and adding her email and coming and checking her and giving her can edit access to this database. If I was to do that, that would still mean Rachel has full access to this database. What I now have to do is create a separate linked view of this database in a separate page and invite her to that. So I'm going to create a new page here. And I'm going to call this Rachel's Tasks. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a linked view of our tasks tracker. And then I'm actually going to choose the My Task view. And this has a filter set up already for us, which says the assignee contains me, which is a relative filter term, which basically means whoever's logged in looking at Notion sees their tasks reflected back to them. So now that I have this linked view of the database and not the actual original database here, what I can go ahead and do is share this particular page with Rachel. So here she is. I'm going to give her full access and go ahead and invite. So now Rachel is officially a guest in our workspace. What I can do is go back to my task tracker, and inside of my task tracker, I'm going to go to the assignee property. And I'm going to assign the task that I want Rachel to see. So I want her to see these 3 tasks here. What I don't want her to see is this super secret task. This is just to be assigned to me. So now if I log into Rachel's workspace, I can toggle over to the marketing lab workspace that has been shared with her. And you'll now see she has Rachel's tasks shared with her, and she has a linked view of the task database that is just showing the things that have been assigned to her. She can, of course, open up these tasks as a page and see all the information inside. She can obviously add her own information within this subpage. She can add comments and tag people like so. She can change the status and mark things off as done. She could change the due date to a different date like this. And she can even delete tasks like so. If she wanted to, she could also come to the filtering and the sorting and add additional stuff. So for example, if she wants to just see things that are in progress, she could add a filter here and say that she just wants the status to be in progress and save for everyone. And now that's just going to show this task here. She can even create new views of this database. So she can add a new view. Let's say she wants to see things in the board view. And so now she's still seeing the task database in a different view, but with only the tasks that she should be able to access. And of course, she can edit the settings to this view and see whatever she likes to see. For example, the assignee, the description, whatever it may be. The key thing here is that she is only seeing the tasks that have Rachel Thompson as the assignee, and she's not able to see any of the other tasks within the task database. So now we've covered how database row permissions work. Let's go over some use cases. And this first use case is something that I and my audience have been super excited by. That is building client portals inside of Notion. So first of all, I'll show you what I've managed to build, and then I'll show you how I built it. So here we are actually again in Rachel's workspace, but this time she's acting as our client, not our contractor. And she has been shared this Acme Co client portal. So when she's shared this, she can come into this page. And first of all, you'll see we have these different tabs. And the first tab is our page content, which I've renamed to chat. So she can come in here and see my welcoming message. And then as you can see, she's replied to that welcome message. And then below that in the actual page body, we have a welcome to your portal video, which explains how to use it. At the very top, we also have some database properties in this database. So first of all, we have a link to her Google folder. So she can go ahead and open that up and see anything that doesn't live in the client portal that is being housed in there. We also have a link to my Calendly booking link. So we can change this out for whoever the client lead is on this particular account. We also have this new deliverable button, and this is actually going to open a Notion form that lives inside of our tasks and deliverables database. And it's going to allow Rachel to basically request new deliverables to us. So she could come in here and say that she wants us to create a new blog post about XYZ, and she can give it the type of blog post. And then all she would need to do is make sure that she tells us which company and which project this is for. And then we would then receive that request and we can then relate it to the correct client project on her behalf. As well as that, she also can see who currently has access to the client portal. So it's herself and Kelly. And if she really wanted to, if she has full access to the client portal, she could come up here, share this to another stakeholder, add them to this client access property, and then using some automations that we've set up, they would then be given access to everything that the clients currently have access to. So that's what's on this just initial page. Then we also have some tabs. So we have the invoices, and this is a view of our invoices database. And so she can come in here and see what's been paid, what's pending, how much is due. And then also if we open up one of these pages, we can see how much they've been charged by the different line items, and then also where to send the money. We can also see in this deals info section some history about how we actually started working together in terms of discovery call notes and recordings, as well as the actual initial proposal that we agreed upon here. And then most importantly, she can come to this projects tab. And this is going to show her the projects that we're working on together. It may just be one, or in some cases, it may be multiple. And so, for example, she can come to the content creation project that we're working on together. She can open this up as a full page. She can come to the tabs here. And the first one we have is project brief. So she can go ahead and look at all of the different project brief and like what we've decided to work on together. She can come to the tasks here and she can see some tasks that have been assigned to her. So pay the initial invoice, sign the contract, complete onboarding tasks. And then also we've decided to share some additional tasks with her, which are actually some of our deliverables. She can then go ahead and go across to the deliverables calendar, which is a filtered view of our task database that have a deliverable type. And so, for example, she can see, okay, next week we've got a YouTube video coming out, we've got a blog post coming out, we've got a newsletter coming out. And then also she can come to this view of the deliverables and see the status of those deliverables. And in some cases, there will be things that are in the client review stage, like this blog post. She can open up this blog post and see all the information about this particular blog post. And we can see the actual brief that was sent to our team. But what we also have is this client feedback page. And so she can open this up. And in here, we have the first and second draft. We have some information about how to give good feedback. And then she can actually open up the blog post itself and read it herself. And then if she likes, she can come in here and add comments to the blog post. Maybe she would like them to reword this intro, for example, and she can send that off and then that will be shared to our team. And then once she's gone ahead and given her feedback, she might decide to move this back into in progress so the team know that there are some revisions that are needed. And then finally, inside the content creation project, she can come to this docs tab and see any of the docs that we've also shared with her. So for example, we might have this client meeting. It can have the client meeting recording attached. Inside the page body, she will be able to see any of the notes that we took during the call. Toggling over to our internal team's view. So this is the marketing lab workspace that the internal team can work out from. You can see that their view of the content creation project is slightly different, as there are some things that we have decided not to share with Rachel. So for example, we just have some general tasks that we're doing in terms of creating the content schedule, creating the content strategy that we have decided not to share with her. But if we decided we did want to share it with her, we can come to this checkbox and check it off. And let's say we decide to share all of them. And now that's been shared with Rachel. When we come back over to her view of the project, she can now see both of those tasks as well. So now you've seen what the client portal setup that I made looks like. Now let's talk through how I actually created it. And I'll walk you through the sort of different levels of complexity as I did them and why I did them. So the simplest level would start with this. We have our client projects database, and this is what we track all of our tasks and documents to do with client projects inside of. Now, the first thing I did was come to here and I shared this and created a new page level access rule. And I basically said anyone that has the client access property, person property, has been assigned to that, they should have can edit access to that particular page. So if we go over to that content creation project, at the very top, we have our client access property with that key icon. So we know it's got page level access. And you can see we've got Rachel and Kelly being shared to that. And if I wanted to, and if I was just doing one project per client, I could keep this very simple and just have this be the client access for the client. So now they are able to come into the project page. If I was to share this particular page with them, so if I was to invite them with their email here, and then also what I would need to do is come to my other master databases. So I'd come to my task database, and here I've also created a rule that anyone that has client access can edit. And the same for my docs database. I've created a rule, anyone with client access can edit. And again, both of these databases have this client access property there waiting for them. So the simplest setup would be to have that set up. And then if I just had one project per client, I could then invite them to their client project. And so they would be able to access this page. And then also when they would toggle over to the tasks and the documents, they would only see those tasks that we have given them client access to in this client access property. So that's the first level, and that's what I first started with. And it's what a lot of other project softwares right now are able to do. You're able to sort of give the client a view of your task board that you're actually using internally. The other thing is that because we are dividing access out using the person property, it still does mean that even without this checkbox share to portal property that I created, you're still able to share that view of your tasks, but pick and choose which tasks you want the client to see by using the client access property. The next level up from that is if we are, and as we are inside of Agency HQ, if we are working on multiple projects with the client, how can we show them all of those projects? Now, what we could potentially do is create a separate view of the client projects and create a sub page somewhere or a page somewhere in a workspace and share that view. But what I decided to do was to actually use one of my existing databases for my company's database. And so what I did here was I added that client access property. And again, in the database, I created a rule that says anyone with client access can edit. And then I basically used my company's database and made it double as a client portal and set it up to be optimized both for a client portal and as our general company's database. So once I had that set up with all the different tabs, the different links, then I was able to share this with the different clients, give them client access, and now you would see the view that I've just shown you where Rachel is able to come into this page. It's the only page in her sidebar, and then she's able to come to this projects tab, which is a tab of the projects database filtered for projects related to this company, and she is able to open up any of these projects and see the tasks again that we have given her client access to. So that was the second layer of complexity that I added to this client portal. The next was that when we share a client portal with a client, what you'll notice is although they have a view of the tasks, and if we give them edit access, they are able to come into the task themselves and change the status and the due dates and things like that. What they're not able to do is actually create new tasks themselves. And in some cases, for example, in this deliverable board, it might be nice for the client to be able to come into this and actually add a new deliverable that they're requesting for us to make for them. So I wanted a way to overcome that current limitation. And so the way I did that was inside of the company's database, I created a button property here. And in the automation, I basically asked it to open the new deliverable form that I have created. So if I go back over to my task database that lives here, you'll see I have, along with some other views, this new deliverable form. And so basically we have the name of the deliverable, which is the task name. We have the deliverable type, which is a select property. And then we have this simple text property, which is for the client project. And we set this so that anyone on the web with the link is able to submit to this form. And then what I did is I added an additional view called requests, and I filtered it so that the status is not done and the client project property is not empty. And so as you will see from that previous entry that we made that Rachel submitted, she wanted a blog post about XYZ. We can see it's for the Acme Co content creation project. And so it'll be our job to now come in here and find that project. And now that has actually been linked to the project. And if we was to come in here, obviously we would see that blog post about XYZ, and it would also be on our deliverables board now. And then obviously it would be up to our team to decide if we want to go ahead and make that. But that's one way we were able to overcome that current limitation. The next level up of complexity is now we have our client portal. We have a way for the client to come in and see multiple projects alongside them and alongside each other, and also for us to pick and choose what they see from within those projects. What I also wanted to do was have a high level view in this client portal of client, like the project or client level information. So invoices and deals info. And so we already have an invoices database inside of Agency HQ, which we can, if I move myself, see here in our finances team space. we have this invoices database, which has some properties like the amount, the service, but most importantly, we have a relation to our company database. And so I added this inside of the company database as a tab. And then I also, again, added inside of this invoices database the option for anyone with client access to be able to edit this information. And so now within this page, inside of the company's database, the client, if we make sure that we tag them with the client access, is able to see that invoice at this top level client portal. And then the same is true of the deals info as well. We have a deals docs database that lives in the sales team space. And then if I want to link any existing deal docs to this company client portal, I can come to link existing and add them here. And then also I have that client access property. And so I can tag them with this and then they will have access. So that's great. We now have a client portal that is able to see multiple projects. We're able to also show things like invoices and proposals. The client's able to create new deliverables. Now, the final big problem was that although it's great that we're able to pick and choose from what we want to share with the client and what we don't want to share with the client, it can sometimes be a little bit tedious to come to that client access and add them. So for example, if this is something I want to share with the client, I need to make sure that I open up this page, come to the client access, add them in here. And then of course, if there's multiple clients, I need to make sure I tag both of the clients like so. So what I wanted was a solution that allowed me to share instantly with a check of a box. And so that's what I did. I added this share to portal property here, and connected to this share to portal property is an automation so that when I do check this box and I open up the page, the client access property should be filled automatically. And now you can see Rachel and Kelly have been filled in here as well. So the automation lives inside of our task database. And if we come to this blue Thunderbolt, we can find it here. And we have one to share something to a portal and one to remove it from a portal. So to share it to the portal, we can see what is happening is either the deliverable type is edited or the share to portal checkbox is checked. So for the share to portal checkbox, if it's checked, what it's going to do is it's going to add to our client access property, and then we've got a specific value. And this value is basically finding the client access from the related client project and then adding them in here. So essentially the way this works is inside of our client projects, as you've seen, we have a property that says client access. So top level, the client project, the client access for that. And so then when we check this box, what the task database is doing is it's sending an automation and it's checking what this client access is. And then it's automatically filling it in here in the task database for that client access. Now, what you also noticed when I showed you that automation is it does the same thing if a task is set to a deliverable. So I'm going to say a deliverable is here. And inside of our task database, we have a property here called deliverable type. And so this allows us to choose whether this is a blog post, a website, a YouTube video, a newsletter, and of course we can have as many deliverables as we like. I also have a bunch of templates in the task database. So if I just choose the template, it will apply that blog post. But by getting a deliverable type, what it's also going to do in the automation, and again, I'll just jump back over to show you, is because this is set to any, so either the share to portal is checked or the deliverable type is added, it's now going to set the share to portal to checked because it isn't when it's a deliverable. So we need to make sure we do that so the UI UX makes sense and all the ones with checkboxes are shared to the portal. And then again, it's going to do the same thing in that it's going to add the client access based on what is there for the client project. So now if we go back over to this client project and come to this new deliverable that we've just created, we should see that this deliverable has Rachel and Kelly applied. So that was great because it overcome needing to add multiple clients and manually add that client access. And then it also meant that we could, with one view, just see very simply what's been shared to the client portal and what hasn't. What I also then wanted was a way to remove things from the client portal. And so in the task database, I created a remove from portal automation. And so this automation is simply when the share to portal checkbox is unchecked, we just want you to clear the client access property. So there's no people in that property. And so, for example, if actually that deliverable I didn't want the client to see because we're still working on it or undecided if we want to do it, then what I can do is uncheck this box. That's going to trigger the automation. And then hopefully we'll see that this client access property is then cleared like so. So we did that for the task database. And then we also did the exact same thing for the docs database. So now we have this share to portal property. I've got this strategy doc that at the moment doesn't have client access. And if I was to check the box, then the automation in the docs database will trigger. And then hopefully we'll see that the client access will be added here as well, like so. So I did that at the project level. I also did that within the client portals for those top level pieces of information. So for the invoices, we also have this share to portal checkbox and the client access property with an automation that fills it out based on the client access in the client portal, and the same for the deals info. So now all of those inputs have a checkbox, and that's how we share it to the client portal. The other automation I added is in the companies database, because obviously we have this client access property here, and we basically want to make sure that it is also reflected over in all of the client projects that are related to this company. So the management project has this, the content creation project has this, and the web design project has this. Now, of course, we could manage this manually, but if we create a new project, or if we actually update who has client access on the client portal, whether it's us or the client themselves, we want to make sure that that is then reflected over in all of those projects. So what I did was in the database, create a client access to client projects automation. And so basically what this says is if the client access property in the company's database is edited, first of all, we're going to define what the client projects are. And that's basically saying that we can see in this company's database that we have the client project relation here. So we can see all of the client projects that have been related to this company and that obviously that are sitting here in the tabs. So we want to define those, and then those client projects, we want to go into the client access and add any of the client access that are on this company. So basically update the client access that are on the company and reflect them over on the client project. And then the final two automations I added was that, of course, if someone has updated the client access in the client portal, it's great that it's been reflected over on the client project, but we also want to make sure that all of the inputs, so the invoices, the proposals, the tasks, the docs that have already been shared to that first client are now also shared to the existing client. And so the way that I did that is, first of all, in the company's database, in the additional properties here, I've got this update client access button. And so if we edit this property, we can see essentially what this is doing is when the button is clicked, first of all, for the invoices, it's going to find any of the invoices that are related to this company and that also currently have the share to portal checkbox checked. And then it's also going to do the same for the deal docs, find any deal docs that are related to this company with the share to portal checked. And so for both of those, again, it's going to update the client access based on what is on this company database. So whenever someone adds the client access or updates the client access here, we need to go in and just hit this button here and run the button to make sure that now for all of the invoices, for example, that are checked, have both Kelly and Rachel added. So we did that on the company's database, and then the same is true on the actual client projects as well. So again, the company database will update the client access, and that will automatically update the client project client access. But also we will need to make sure that any of the tasks that we have already checked here are also updated. And so we can come in here, we have this update client access button that does the exact same thing, but on the client project level. We can hit this, and now all of those tasks will also be updated with the new client that has been added. Okay, so now let's take a look at the second use case of database row permissions, and that is collaborating with contractors. So obviously at the start of this video, I showed you how to somewhat do that with our explanation of database row permissions. But let's look at how I've actually decided to go ahead and start using this. So first of all, inside of my client projects database, as well as having a client access property that we add our clients to, what you also see is when I hit view more details, I have this section called team. And this is where I actually specify each of the different roles that each person is going to be working on for this project. So I have myself as the client lead, John is going to be the developer, and then also we have Rachel, again now reverting back to a contractor, as our social media person. So what we're going to do is, first of all, on the client project database, I'm going to add some rules. So we have the client access rule set up already, but I'm also going to add a rule for the social media person. When they are tagged, they are going to get a can edit access to the client project database. And also I'm going to add a rule for the developer. They can have edit access. And while we're here, we might as well do one for the other role we have in those properties, which is the video editor. So I'm going to create that rule as well. So now when we go back to this database inside of the properties, we can see that any of the roles that we might actually contract out, when we assign that person to this property, they're now going to have access to this page. But we need to also do this for the databases that live within this page. So for the tasks and for the docs database. So I'm going to come back to my everything team space. Going to come to the task database, and much like I did in the intro to this video, I'm going to add a rule, and I'm going to say if someone has been assigned, they are going to get edit access. And then again, we'll see this icon here appear so we know it's working. For the docs, it can sometimes be a little bit unclear how we could share this with someone via the properties. Right now, I have this owner property, and this is by default set to the person who created it, but we can actually then toggle it and change it to someone else. So for example, if I wanted this to be Rachel, I could make Rachel the owner. And at the moment, it's currently set to a limit of one person. But for this particular use case, I'm going to set it to no limit. And so now we can have multiple people assigned as the owner. And so I'm going to make this the property that is then allowing us to share this to multiple people. So I'm going to hit share. And I'm going to add a rule, and then I'm going to say that the owner can edit this access. And then you also notice I have this attendees property. This is for when we're capturing meeting notes. So while I'm here, I'll also add this as a rule as well. So we've set up how the databases need to give the contractors their access and the correct access. Now what we need to do, as we did at the start of the video, is actually create a separate page for the contractor to be able to see a linked view of these databases. Now, inside of Agency HQ, we actually have this Notion onboarding SOP that we use to onboard internal team members into Notion. And one of the steps we have here, step 3, is that we allow internal team members to create a new My Home page by clicking this button here, which then generates this block with a homepage that we've already set up ahead of time. And what is inside this homepage is a linked view of our task database. And like we did last time, we have set the filter to have that relative me term. So whoever is logged into Notion and looking at this task database will only see the tasks that have been assigned to them. And so what this is normally used for is when we have internal team members onboarding into Notion, they go through our onboarding checklist, they are linked to this onboarding SOP, and then they can create their homepage and drag it into their private section. And then that can be their sort of all-in-one dashboard to see tasks assigned to them. But for our contractors, we actually need to do this for them because they don't get given a private section when they are just a guest of a workspace. So what I'm going to do is drag this into my private section like so. I'm going to hit move to private, that's fine. And then what I'm going to do is call this Rachel's home, like so. And then I'm going to share this with Rachel, like so, and give her full access. And then that moves this from my private section into my shared section. So I can see I've shared this with Rachel. And so now switching back over to Rachel's workspace, this is what she sees when she comes to our workspace. She has in her shared section, Rachel's home, and now she can see the task database, and she has a bunch of tasks for some of our client projects. And of course, she can come into these tasks, and if she wants, she can actually come over to the view of the client project, and she's only going to see those tasks that have been assigned to her. And like last time, she can check these tasks off once she has completed them, and they'll clear from this view. Now, you may be asking yourself, why do we need to create this separate home view when we already have the home page inside of Notion already set up? Well, unfortunately, a current limitation of Notion is when we try to use this as a guest, we are then prompted to join as a workspace member. So guests are not given access to home, the native home inside of Notion. And so we do actually need to create these separate homes for our contractors if we want them to just see a view of our tasks and not all of our tasks. Of course, we've just done a very simple view and shown them their tasks in this home page. But if we wanted to, we could create separate sections. So we could show their projects, their tasks, their docs, if we wanted this to be more built out as well. If this feature has pushed you over the line for wanting to use Notion for your business, then you might want to check out my ideal setup for businesses inside of Notion. It's the same setup that's been trusted by over 500 businesses now, and it features a company wiki, a project manager, a CRM, and so much more. So click this video here to check it out, and I'll see you over there.